All right, good evening, everyone. It is 5:34, and I will now call to order tonight's special meeting of the Evanston Preservation Commission. We have 7 commissioners present. I want to thank everyone tonight for coming to this special meeting during the holiday week. Seeing so many stakeholders testifies to how special this city resource is to everyone. The City of Evanston's Preservation Ordinance empowers this body to oversee and administer the community's historic preservation program. It is Section 283G24, it's also written in the agenda, that tasks the Preservation Commission with reviewing city-initiated projects that affect registered resources. Therefore, the Commission's purpose this evening is to consider the meeting materials and tonight's input, provide comments based on our expertise and experience, and then develop a summary of comments for City Council's consideration at their July 8th meeting. For this type of review, Commissioners, we are not beholden to the standards for review like a certificate of appropriateness review requires. I would like to note, though, for the Commission, that this project was already granted a COA under the administrative review process. To obtain the utmost advantages and the least project changes, best practices would have had this review performed during project design development and before the COA application. The Commission looks forward to serving the city more and more under a process by which the primary advisory review is performed early in design and then, as needed, followed by the binding COA review. Tonight, our agenda has only one item for discussion. Staff, will you please read it? Cade, will you please read it into record?
Following request of approval of contract award with John Cano and Company Incorporated for the Evanston Dog Beach Access Project, bid number 2418. The Administration and Public Works Committee referred the project to the Preservation Commission for further review and comment. The Commission is empowered to review and comment on city-initiated projects or activities that may affect registered or eligible historic resources, Code Section 283G24.
Thank you. So we will begin with public comments. And all speakers, you do have to sign in, and please use either the microphone that's at the podium, or there is a handheld microphone, I believe, that they put there for your use. And be sure to speak into those devices so that we can record your comments. First to speak, we will have the Dog Beach Working Group. Now, for the group, I've granted a 10-minute time period for them to speak, and the other public commenters will have 3 minutes to provide input. So who is here from the working group?
I thought someone was going to present the current plan. No?
We have, oh, that'll happen later, right. First public comments, and then the project is presented.
Fair enough. Okay. Visual aids. My name is Mike Myers. I am the acting mayor of the Dog Beach, which means I'm there 2-3 times a day. I've picked up a lot of poo-poo, and I love that place. I help Lewis run our Facebook community, which is like 1,200 members. So it's a community of people and dogs, and it's beautiful. As you know, it's gorgeous. So, in this case, I happen to be an expert, which is rarely the case. So I'm an expert because of these two. This is Molly and Ella. And we go to the Dog Beach a lot. I am also an expert because this is my sister, Vicki. And Vicki has MS, and she's been in a wheelchair for 30 years. So I understand, this is Vicki. She looks like me. I understand the issues of people with mobility challenges. So my dream is to get Molly, Ella, and Vicky down to the beach any way we can. And that's why we're here today. So, we're here to talk about an alternative plan. The existing one is amazing, but it's $800,000, and it goes through that great natural preserve that's just to the north of the Dog Beach. And I think we have some beautiful pictures of that. Do we? Next slide, please. Oh, do I have to press the button? Okay, so that's our view from the Dog Beach. And it's also the view from Clark Street Beach, and it's also a view from anyone passing by. It's beautiful. And we think it needs to stay that way. It needs to be preserved, it needs to be protected. There's birds, the dogs love to bark at the birds, and it's just a great part of the whole environment. So we have some objectives. We want ADA access for people like my sister Vicky and everyone here, and the elderly. We're gonna talk to some people from the Mather who struggle to get down to the beach as it is today. We want to minimize impact on the surrounding environment and natural habitat, and we want to keep it as beautiful and natural as it is. That's how God invented it. Let's not mess with it. We want to provide ample space for mobility challenge users to enjoy all Dog Beach activities. So right now, it's a challenge. Some people can get down. Priscilla takes her walker, she parks it at the gate, and then she gets down to the bench. Thanks for the bench at Parks and Rec. And other people aren't that lucky. Other people who might have an electric chair or a scooter, you can't get near the sand. If you get near the sand, it's over. The game's over. So we want full access, and we want it quickly and inexpensively. And we want it to be totally, totally usable. You don't build a ramp and then stop and let people get out on the sand, because the minute you get on the sand, you're stuck, right? We think right now, we know we have 3 parking spots, 3 disabled parking spots that are kind of far away. They are north of the Clark Street Beach entrance. 3 spots, 2 beaches on a beautiful summer weekend day. No, it's not enough. Luckily, right next to the entrance to the beach, the Dog Beach, there are many parking spots right along the rocks. Right now, they're used by boaters, which is great. I know some boaters. Let's give 2 or 3 or 4 to disabled, so they can be right there, get out of their cars or their vans or whatever, and get to the gate, which is what we're going to show you. So we want this to happen quickly. We don't want to wait months and months and months, which is going to be the case with this plan that the city currently has. We can show you something that could be done in a couple of weeks. And we want to save money. $800,000 is a lot of money. Probably it's going to go up from there. And in the process, there's going to be a lot of equipment, a lot of machinery on top of that beautiful preserve, eventually over into the Dog Beach. So it's going to mess things up. So we want this to happen quickly, safely, intelligently, and at maybe less than $800,000. Because there are probably places throughout Evanston that could use some attention for ADA accessibility. If we have that money, let's spend it in some other places. So those are our objectives. Any questions? Any answers? Okay.
Isn't that a bird sanctuary?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. It's a bird sanctuary to the north of Park Street.
Can you be sure you're speaking into the microphone?
Sorry. From what I understand, it's a bird sanctuary to the north of Clark Street Beach. I don't know if it's been designated to the south of Clark Street Beach entrance. It should be a bird sanctuary. There's a lot of birds. Yeah. What do you think?
There's a sign up there saying keep out of it because of the birds.
Does anyone know if it's a bird sanctuary? On that side? Anyway, the birds don't read signs. if they see a beautiful area, they're going to go there, and they do. So good for the birds. Let's give them their space. So those are our objectives. Let's move on to the next slide, please. We have a man here named John Kennedy, who is a very smart man, a very wise man. He's also kind of a good designer. So we got John Kennedy involved, and he came up with this alternative design, which is, as you're going to find out, fast, affordable, effective. We can have it done really quickly without touching that prairie area, without getting near it. I'd like to introduce Mr. John Kennedy.
And just letting you know, you have 4 minutes.
So I was invited down to take a look. And what's interesting, the existing ramp, it's 21 feet by 4 feet down, which is to the right there from this aerial view. There's another 6 feet to the left of it. And my thought was, gee, if you built a ramp down that, and it's a 3-foot drop from level of the ground, approximately 3 feet down. So that means it's a 36-foot ramp. By code, you have to have a landing spot, which is that green little box in the middle. And once you get down to the end, you could have a nice beach mat for wheelchairs, perhaps 10 by 25 feet, But you're still 50 feet away from the water. And this alternative is easy. It's straightforward. The ramp could be aluminum, stock aluminum. We got a quote of $23,000 today from a manufacturer in Kenosha. Probably it would need concrete posts underneath it to stabilize it, but you're talking 10 posts for the whole thing. And, basically, it could be done quickly. Next slide. Any questions on that one? This is a side elevation view. You have the existing gate, the upper left corner. A new concrete pad could be built that's 5 feet out from the wall, that's flat. So a person comes in the existing gate, takes a left, and is now on a platform facing the ramp going down. The first 18-foot section comes down to the landing platform. The second 18-foot section comes down to the ground. There you have your mats. Basically, it's an off-the-shelf solution. This could be concrete, this could be wood, or it could be aluminum. Aluminum gets it in quickly, and the advantages of aluminum are, we all know what northern gales are in Lake Michigan. The city likes to remove things from, that can be destroyed. For example, the pier at the boat ramp is removed during the winter. This arrangement can be broken down by maintenance and removed just as easily. Okay? Next slide. Advantages of this, there's no physical impact on the adjacent dune and native habitat. So there's no visual impact also from the street. It allows mobility challenged users to be closer to the lake because it gets them down there, not up against the rocks. It's inexpensive, roughly $30,000 would probably do the whole thing. If there are current funds allocated, we have a lot of ADA requirements in the city from an infrastructure point of view that could be applied to. It could be completed in 30 days for use this summer. Ample parking is available, as Mike said, just if you open up those gates for people with handicap. And then a modular design allows for different configurations and removal during the winter. Any questions? Again, this is not a perfect plan, but we're throwing it out as an alternative to $800,000. Thank you.
We can also use this as a study on usage, on usability, and find out.
The 10 minutes is all used up. That was perfect timing. Thank you. And we received your the commissioners all received your presentation prior to the meeting. Thank you. All right, we're continuing our public comment portion of the meeting. The first person at the top is David. All right, can you state your last name, please, or your full name?
Lawlor.
Ah, got it, thank you.
Sorry if my writing wasn't clear.
No problem.
I own a dog walking company here in Evanston. I take dogs to the beach all the time. I've been doing, and my own dogs for 20 years. God, it makes me feel old. I mean, $800,000 seems excessive. I absolutely, completely support ADA. I believe people need to be able to get down to the beach. But to level, according to the city plan, the bird sanctuary in which to put a ramp to do what they just pointed out to you that could be done for 10%, less than 10%, and have it removable because, we lost the dog beach 5 years ago because the water came all the way up. And 5 years ago, they built a ramp, a concrete ramp going out on the beach, and then the water came up, sucked out all the sand from underneath, the thing collapsed. And so building something so permanent for $800,000 with the potential of the water level rising and then destroying it seems kind of pointless. Having something potentially that can be removed and reinstalled depending on lake levels seems like a better solution. Pouring a new concrete footer versus trying to replace 20 feet of concrete sidewalk. I mean, I'm just thinking monetarily, it's not really comparison. And you're the preservation board, and leveling a nature potential bird sanctuary, but at least a natural looking area with natural grass and, to put in concrete seems less preservation-y. So again, I completely support people with ADA. With ADA requirements. There's people who have guide dogs and, things like that. They want to come down. We have elderly people who love to walk their dogs. And so, we do need something. The other thing I have done a little research on is in Europe, when they have ADA things, they actually hire people to assist ADA people to go down into areas in which ADA solutions like this cannot be done. And I've heard that people might have issues that it affects their independence. But again, $800,000, which probably would balloon, that's me done, to $1 million seems excessive. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and just so everyone knows, there should be, you have a minute left, then there should be a little yellow light that comes on, and then the little chime is when your time is done. All right, next up is Milton Zimmerman. Do I have that correct?
Yes.
Welcome.
Hi, my name is Milton Zimmerman. That's my wife, Michelle. And this is one of our favorite members of the family. This is Norman Zimmerman. And you can see, you can see from everybody here already knows Norman Zimmerman because you can see the background is the beach, okay? And so first things first, as residents of the city of Evanston, we are so grateful to have Dog Beach. It is such a great resource. And you can see this is our community, and we really, really care about everything and anything as it relates to the beach. We're thankful for Mayor Mike, and we're thankful to the rest of our both canine and human friends for all coming together and really caring about what's what and what's right. So to that end, we're so conscientious and we really care so much that we're here to, give you some feedback, and we thank you for that opportunity. The bottom line at the end of the day is there's many different ways to go about this. We've studied your proposal, and we appreciate it. And we think that there's probably a way to save resources and go about it in a more economical way, and also in a way that's got form and function. So to that end, we really appreciate your consideration here, and I'll hand it over to then the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have Priscilla Thomas.
My name is Priscilla Thomas. I live at the Mather. I'm 89 years old and have a 14-year-old Labradoodle, and his name is John. John and I go to the beach every single morning. I just love it. I come from New England, and it reminds me of the Maine coast, and I love the rocks down there. They're just wonderful. I have a walker that I use when I walk John because he can pull me, and I can't walk very far without hurting because I have spinal stenosis. But I can go down the existing ramp with my walker, and I park it there, and I go on the beach. I used to be able to walk to the end of the beach because I could stop halfway down and lean against the rocks there. Now that that new silly fence is up there, I can't do that. So I can't walk to the end of the beach anymore. There are a lot of people down there who do have bad backs, bad knees or whatever, and they leaned against those rocks so they could just sit on them to get down to the end. Excuse me. Because you want to stay with your dog, to be with them if they go to the bathroom, or they should get in a scuffle with another dog. So now I sit on that bench, which I'm very happy you all put in, but I have to stay up at that end. I've just seen the plans through Mike of the proposed thing through the lovely grassland there. I'm concerned if I'm on my walker with a dog and you're running into a lot of other people. It's going to be confusing. It's going to be hard, and I think it will be very hard for us who are somewhat handicapped to do that. So anyway, I hope you don't do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Ted Glasgow.
Hello. My name is Ted Glasso, and as a change of pace, I'm not here as a dog owner or a dog walker, but I do advocate for the lake. I'm a photographer, and I take pictures of the lake, and I participate in beach cleanups and things like that, and I know the specialness of beach dunes, and I'm here to advocate for not destroying that little nature area there that's dunes, and it has dune grasses, and it provides a habitat for dune animals and dune insects. And so I'm speaking just on that. I think it would be great to avoid having to disrupt that area completely and bisect it with the ramp. And like a lot of other people here, I'm all for ADA. It's not anything about why the ramp would be there. It's just, I think it would be better not to destroy that area and keep it as nice as it is. I know it's already been altered, and it goes through a lot of, people walk through it, things like that. But for whatever we can do to keep it, that would be great. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, Jane Hampson.
Hello. Hi. Jane is not here, but she asked if I would read a letter on her behalf.
Sure.
And she wrote, Dear Preservation Commissioners and City Staff, I just read in Evanston Now that there's been a brief postponement in the possible ADA ramp for the dog beach. So I thought I'd send my thoughts as a disabled resident. To me, the design appears ridiculously expensive and over-designed for its purpose. I incurred a spinal cord injury in May 2020 when I was not allowed to have treated due to COVID. When it became very serious, I finally was allowed surgery and came out of it paralyzed below the waist. I've spent the last 4 years, as my nerves regenerated to some extent, learning to walk again, At this time, I wear ankle-foot orthotics, AFOs, and I need a walker. For those of us who are disabled but not in wheelchairs, our ability to remain upright for extended periods of time is usually limited. If such a ramp happens, I would want it to be as short as possible so I could use my energy when I got to my destination, not in getting to my destination, which is why accessible parking is always close to the destination. The single biggest limitation or obstacle for my ability to walk outdoors in Evanston is the sidewalks. Walker or rollator wheels catch in broken patches, areas raised by tree roots, on stones, etc., which stops them dead in their tracks. In my case, if I'm not careful, I would have a debilitating fall forward. So I look down at the sidewalk all the time, which is exactly contrary to what I'm trying to do, which is walk in as upright a posture as possible with eyes forward, which negates the therapeutic value of my walk and reinforces poor form. Therefore, I do not walk as much as I should in my recovery, as it's too dangerous in Evanston. At times I walk in the street as those surfaces are generally better, but that also has obvious risks. There are other suburban areas which are much safer for sidewalk walking with assistive devices. Examples are Glenview and Gilson Park in Wilmette. I've wondered why I don't see more people like me walking around Evanston, and I now know that this is the reason. It isn't safe, aside from requiring a huge use of energy just to be cautious. We need our energy to recover or gain strength, not to mention the plight of the general public who trip on our sidewalks, often leading to at least a short-term disability. Let me know if I can help in any way. Okay. Signed, sincerely, Jane Hampson.
Thank you. And can you just state your name for the record, please?
My name is Jeff Barini, and I'm up next in the batting order here.
I was going to say, yes. Perfect.
Okay.
And so,
all right,
and
Jeff Barini.
And just to let everybody know real quick before we start your time,
Yes.
Ms. Hampson's letter was received by the
Right.
commission before the meeting, so we did have that.
She'll appreciate
But
that.
yes, go ahead.
All right. Jeff Barini, 2nd Ward. I forgot what I was going to say. Let me begin by saying thank you to all of you for holding this meeting, first of all. I know that, your purview is the historic lakefront, and I think that this project definitely needs, close review by you because it is very impactful and large, and at least appears at this point to be kind of standalone, not part of any bigger plan for the lakefront. So I think your review is critical at this time. Now, as to me, I'm a 30-plus year resident of Evanston. My son uses a power wheelchair and has for all of his life. He's not a very beachy guy, so I don't know that he would ever use the ramp to the dog beach or not, but we have a great deal of experience with ramps and accessibility here in Evanston. And I know that what we think of this is that there's got to be something between $700,000 on this and, clearly what's been presented today at $30,000 or more, because every dollar that's not spent on this project could and should be spent on other accessibility here in Evanston. So I think that's a critical point to do. The other point I'd like to make, just an observation, is kind of questioning how we got to where we are today. And my thought is that this has not been a very good design process on this project. What I know, two options sort of appeared at the beach, A or B. You like this circuitous one or you like this switchback one? Give us your feedback. And, the reason that we're here today is not enough people were asked about that or input gathered. At last week's council meeting, Councilmember Newsma complained that we've seen this project before and that he's tired of people popping up at the last minute, having objections to things. Well, this is why. Rather than let people in at the last minute, these people all should have been involved in the first minute and had their input inculcated to the project and taken into account. And even if going forward, they should be part of some review process so that at the very least, everybody who's at the dog beach understands why whatever solution is put in place is needed, either from an ADA standpoint or a construction standpoint or lakefront weather standpoint, whatever it is, something that gives people greater involvement in what's being done as opposed to have it done for them, not to them. And that would be much better, I think, in this particular project. So thanks again for your time and attention to this. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. And Mike Myers, you're on here. Are you on here as an individual or? Okay, okay. Okay, thank you. Oh, okay. Is there anyone else that does have a public comment that just didn't have a chance to sign up on the sheet? Okay. Okay, then we will go ahead and move into our discussion. And this is where we welcome the Public Works Department to present the Evanston Dog Beach Access Project.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stephanie Levine. I'm a senior project manager with the Public Works Agency. This is Laura Biggs. She's the city engineer. I'm going to try not to knock this over. That would be terrible. We have a short presentation, so maybe we can go to the next slide. Just wanted to give everyone a little background on some of the steps we've taken. This isn't like everything we've done, but this is kind of like the major points. I did forget one meeting we had with the rec board. I'm not sure exactly when that took place, but essentially back in October of 2022, we went before the council and we were directed to design a permanent ADA accessible access to the dog beach. In November, we brought forward a change order with Smith Group. They're an A&E firm, architectural engineering firm, that also has coastal engineers. They were already working with us on some preliminary shoreline improvements. And so we brought forth a change order to have them come up with some initial designs for, for this improvement. Then in February of 2023, we reviewed those designs with the council. So that occurred at that council meeting. And there was a lot of discussion back and forth. The first concept, and I don't have a photo of that here, but that's that kind of switchback concept that you may have seen that's running along the rock revetment. And then the second concept, and that's the one that actually we kind of moved forward with. And so there was a lot of back and forth discussion, like which one should we do, what's most appropriate, and we weren't completely decided. The first concept, the switchback concept, it was estimated to be more expensive. We still assume it would be a more expensive solution. It's much more hard infrastructure because we're dealing with a very, very narrow strip of land, and we've got to actually get, I think someone mentioned there's a 3-foot drop in elevation. It's actually a 6-foot drop in elevation. So we've got to get from, 6 feet high to, 6 feet down in this really short span. So it's a lot of infrastructure, and we weren't really thrilled with that idea, but there was concern about this naturalized space that occurs just north of the break wall. So we kind of left that meeting with like, well, let's just try to figure it out. And so we started working with some community members, primarily the folks that take care of the stewards for the Clark Street Beach Bird Sanctuary. And we met out there with them a couple times in March to kind of walk the site and just talk about the solution and the idea of like, can we go through here? What would that mean? What do we need to do this safely? There's kind of almost an existing path almost in this area already. So probably just from people kind of walking through here. So we're just trying, can we just replicate this? What do we need to do to be sensitive to the plant material? The plant material that's there was installed in 2009-10 when we built the Clark Street Beach, the beach house itself. Before then, it was all just sand. So if you look at any old aerials, you'll be able to see that. So it's kind of grown up over time, and now it's quite developed now. So we're obviously interested in preserving it. It's actually, there was a question about, is it part of the official bird sanctuary? It is not. Only areas north of the beach house are considered the official bird sanctuary, but of course birds go everywhere. They don't look at signs. But in any event, we met out there a couple times. We talked about it. quite a bit, and we all agreed, the stewards, staff, everyone agreed that we think we can make this work. We just have to kind of be careful. Let's see if we can like actually find there's certain plant material that's more sensitive than others. Let's see if we can find those plants. We can try to protect them, move around them, if necessary, relocate them. So we kind of proceeded along those lines. So then in April, we went back to council and we said, okay, we think we know what we want to do. We think concept 2 is the way to go. So we need to get Smith Group back in here because we need them to design, to really actually design the solution. And when we start to look at the concepts, when we get a little bit, or the concept when we get a little bit further along, I can explain like why they made some of the decisions they made, because that's kind of relevant. Like there's some questions that have come up, and I think I can hopefully clarify like why did they do it this way, you know. So anyway, we got that approved in April. And then in May, we met again on site. And I believe that actually included some members of the Dog Beach, and it included members of the Clark Street Beach Bird Sanctuary. In fact, I think you were there at that meeting, and I think Councilmember Kelly was there, a number of other folks too. It was a pretty big group, actually. We actually walked through, like, here's where it will go, and just kind of get an idea of, like, this is what it's going to look like, and talked about the materiality and what we were thinking. You can go to the next slide. So then in June, we went ahead and we hired a plant biologist. This was the individual recommended actually by the Clark Street Beach Bird Sanctuary stewards. And we met out there with, I didn't record all the times, but we met out there with her several times. And she actually located all the sensitive plants, identified everything. We had them located on our survey. We coordinated her with Smith Group, and everything was designed to kind of work around these plants and be very careful. And one of the things that came up during this process was the Clark Street Beach Bird Sanctuary folks recommended, hey, initially, and you'll see on this concept, it's just a pathway. It's literally just like a sidewalk. But in the final design, you'll see there's actually a boardwalk through part of it. And that was their request to, like, can we just use a boardwalk to further get people, like, kind of away from these plants, keep things separate, and also in an attempt to, during the construction, keep things as as little impact as possible. Like, we're just, like, putting in posts, we're putting in this boardwalk, and we're really not disturbing the landscape at all. So that was also another adjustment that we made to try to relate to try to address their concerns. So back in October of 2023, we had to go back to council again. We needed yet another change order for Smith Group. This was to help kind of coordinate all of the work associated with this boardwalk. Also, we had some incidents on site where some folks with low vision issues were getting stuck on the property. They couldn't get off because of the gates, and there weren't enough lights. So staff asked that we add a light at the gate, and they also asked that we provide an electrified gate access for control with kind of a crash bar to exit. So that added a little bit of scope also, so we had to go back to council to add that scope. Then in January finally we're getting to 2024 of this year, the construction documents were kind of getting completed. This project, because it's on the lakefront, we have to submit it to the IDNR, the Army Corps of Engineers, the IEPA. We also have to submit it to MWRD. I forgot to write that on there. But in any event, those documents were all submitted to all of those agencies so that they could start their process of reviewing them as well. In April, we submitted the documents to the city for the city's permitting, and also to you folks, obviously reviewed through CADE. Later in April, the documents were issued for bid. We got a final determination letter basically approving the project from the IEPA at the end of April. Bids were received in May. We went to council with a recommendation in June, and here we are tonight. So just a little background. So just a quick couple shots of the existing conditions. This obviously taken from the lake, looking back, and there's no arrow to point here. But yeah, that's kind of the area where we're talking about getting this, initially it was a path, and now it's like a path with a little bit of boardwalk that comes through and then kind of exits out to the dog beach. That would be pretty much right in that area. Go to the next slide. Just another shot of this area, and kind of, this is a pretty recent photo, I think, from Google Maps of what it looks like today. Again, this area has really just kind of developed. When we built the Clark Street Beach house in 2009, this was literally all sand, and we actually planted the plant material that for the most part that you see here. I'm sure it's of course grown and expanded itself quite a bit since then. But if you look at aerials, you'll see that it like slowly kind of emerges out of the sand. This is the view from Sheridan Road. It's kind of hard to see the site, but it's just, you can see the building kind of in the left-hand side of the screen, and it's kind of just off to the right of there as well. I don't think from Sheridan's Road, I don't think you'll be able to see any part of this installation if it in fact gets installed. And then this is, again, another view. This is much closer up of the site itself. This is kind of taken just from the end of the turnaround drive. And certainly from this perspective, I think you would probably, I'm sorry I don't have three-dimensional images for you guys to kind of try to visualize, but I'm sure you would probably see a little bit of a walking path and maybe some of the planks from the boardwalk if it was built. And then we are proposing on the lakeward side to have, we need to have a fence. We've got to contain dogs, but also, and people, but actually mostly people, frankly, because we have to keep our beaches fenced off. And we have fence there today. It's just a different type of fence. Also, just a couple views of the site. Now, this view on the left-hand side, this is taken when the water levels were a bit higher. Water levels vary greatly. They can be very high. They can be very, very low. We obviously went through a very high lake level period in 2020. I think this was probably taken in 2022, although I'm not sure. But this is looking south from kind of the north end of the beach. So at this time, there really wasn't any beach. But now, of course, there's more. And then this picture on the right is, I believe, pretty, not quite, but it's pretty close to the current solution that we have right now, which is basically a ramp that greatly exceeds ADA requirements that comes from the roadway elevation down to the beach. Okay, so finally back, now we can look at concept 2 and like what is going on here and why did we do this? So I wish I had a pointer, or we don't have a. This has a pointer associated with it.
This
You
thing.
Press this button.
Okay. Now I've said that, and I might regret that, right? Because you get to see how shaky my hands are. Okay, so this is the building right here. This is the beach house right here, and there's an existing low stone wall here. So the idea is that you enter here, just at the edge of this stone wall, and and at the concept level, it was just a walkway. So you would kind of gently walk down. It's not even a ramp. I mean, it's actually it's at a walking slope. It's not a ramp. And that was part of the help that this provided. It's like this really gentle walk. So it's shown at 6 feet wide, which is slightly wider than a sidewalk. Sidewalks are 5 feet 4 inches in town. So slightly wider than a sidewalk. And this first area here, we have, right now, when you kind of exit the dog beach area, people like to kind of hose down the dog because the dogs get, they like to play in the sand. So that hose is literally, we drag a hose all through this area right now,
and leave it here so that you can, wash the dog down. So we wanted to create that space, but give it get it off of like the side of the road, because here it's on the side of the road, kind of give it its own little space. And the nice thing is, it's right next to the beach house where the water is. So we don't have to drag a hose, 300, I don't even know what the distance is, let's call it a few hundred feet. We can just drag a hose like 10 feet, 15 feet, and boom, we've got water for the dogs. And then the rest of it is again, just this walkway that gently works its way down to kind of this secondary area. And can you go back one slide? Okay. So the way it works is you have to have kind of this in-between zone when you walk the dog up on a leash, and then you kind of go through this first gate, and then you're in this kind of caged area, okay? And then you take the dog off the leash, and then you open the lower gate, and boom, you're out on the beach. So we have to have something like this transition area. So now if you go to the next slide. So you walk down this walkway here, and then this is the transition area. So there's a gate right here, and you can walk inside here, take the dog off the leash, and then there's a gate right here, and boom, you're out right onto the beach. Now, a couple other things are happening here that are important. First, we offered a secondary entry here because we know a lot of people are coming from the south and just walking up through the park, and that maybe they don't want to walk all the way around, and they might try to sneak in anyway, because people do that all the time now anyway. So, but it's steep here, so we have to have steps. Okay, but so they have a second entrance right here. The other thing I want to point out is what is going on over here? Why is this look like this? First, just to describe it, so there's this walkway that continues out parallel to the beach, and then it becomes dashed. What's happening? It's buried. It's slowly going downhill and gets buried, okay? And then in front of it, it looks like a bunch of rocks here. We have to install a whole system of revetments to the east of this walkway. The reason that we have to do this, all this, bury this sidewalk, put all these stones here, is because when we have high lake levels or we've got a big storm, this entire area is underwater or could be underwater or it's partially underwater. And I don't know if you guys went down here during the high lake levels, but wow, it was a little scary. Waves were absolutely smashing against these rocks here. And so the only way we can actually guarantee that we'll have a safe entry that's always kind of at the correct elevation as where this, deposits you, is to create this extended walkway that goes into the soil or into the sand and is protected by a revetment. So that's this is, maybe not our ideal situation. It'd be great if we had a more permanent beach, but we don't. And right now we can't without a significant investment much further out in the lake. This is really the only way we can create kind of a more permanent solution. If we were to look at a different kind of solution which I think was shown, that runs in this direction, unless we removed it anytime the water came up or we had a storm, it would be destroyed. So that's why we're trying to take advantage of this area. This area is really well protected because of this revetment and the size of the beach. If you look at the size of this beach, it's just enormous. So this area just isn't subject to the same kind of lake conditions it's kind of crazy. It's right on the other side of right? It is crazy, but it's just not subject to the same situation. So we can pretty much know that this investment here is going to be protected. It's going to hold up. here, this is really got to be really robust. So anyway, so that was the concept plan, and then if you go to the next page, these were some images that were provided. I just took this from the council presentation back in, February of 2023. So just some kind of look and feel of what the consultant was hoping this would look like. So I just wanted to kind of share that too. You can go to the next one. Okay, and so now we're into the less attractive construction documents. But this is the final design. And you can see the shapes are pretty similar. It's this walkway that kind of meanders around. Again, this is Clark Street Beach House. This is that stone wall. The path starts right at the end. There's this kind of small area here where, you can kind of wash down the dog. Then there's this walkway that in this area turns into a boardwalk. They did add a small little area, like an overlook, that kind of extends beyond that. We thought that would just be kind of a nice little feature. Then at this area, it goes back into a sidewalk and terminates in this kind of transition area that I mentioned earlier. We also have this kind of shortcut walkway here, again with the stairs because of the elevation change. Then we have this sidewalk that again extends out this direction parallel to the revetment, and will likely be buried, potentially sometimes largely buried, sometimes not. It's going to depend on how the sands kind of shift around. And then to the east of that, there is the new revetment that will protect basically this walkway. And then, I'm sorry this is so small and difficult to see, but I wanted to show just a cross-section. If you can go back one slide just for a second. Okay. This cross-section is taken right about here. Okay, so right about where this pathway starts. Okay, thank you. And what I wanted to just point out here is, this is the existing revetment here. So this is the elevation of the roadway. This is the existing revetment. This is that sidewalk. We actually have to fill to bring the elevation up in this area. And then this is this new revetment that is to the east of this sidewalk to protect it. So just to give you an impression of kind of what that would look like. And then just wanted to share a couple images of what I think it's going to kind of look and feel like. The boardwalk itself would only, on the western edge, would have something like this, just kind of a tow rail, basically. And then on the eastern edge would have, I think it's a 4-foot-high fence. It's basically just like a welded wire, a 3-inch welded wire with a steel frame that would be black. And then the walkway, would probably look fairly similar to this. So basically looks like a sidewalk kind of embedded into this existing landscape of dune grasses. And then on the eastern edge, it would also have a fence. This is again, also like a 4-foot-high welded wire panel fence. And I think that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Right now, we have questions from the commissioners for the Public Works Department. Commissioners?
Question. Could you go back to the final design? Yeah, the back final design. Yeah, okay, so right there, for instance, the smaller half-moon circle at the end of the path, that's adjacent to the dog beach, to the revetment right there, that space right there. What's the elevation of that in relationship to the elevation of the parking lot, for instance?
Again, at that location, I believe that's about 4 feet below the elevation of the parking lot, and then we have to fill on the other side to, in order to raise the elevation to meet the new proposed sidewalk.
And is it that point where you have to actually cut through the steel there?
Yes, that's
You cut through
correct.
the steel.
Yes, that is
And-
correct.
And that cut in the steel, sorry, I didn't have I should have probably found it on the prints, but from the top of the revetment to the bottom of the cut, how deep is that cut right there?
Oh, goodness, I'm not certain. I don't think I could speak to that level of detail.
Okay, and then so, but the level of that half circle area is 4 feet below so it's 2 feet then above the beach level.
I believe so.
So then the ADA ramp area from there that you have extended down through there, the cement, then is a area that has a drop in elevation of 2 feet.
So the sand level varies quite a bit on the beach, and I think without looking at the drawings, I can't tell you the exact proposed slope of that walkway, but I know looking at that cross-section that I showed you, that we have to bring the elevation, or at least when they were drawing this, sands are changing all the time.
Right.
That we would have to bring the elevation up slightly, yes.
Another question is that the dragging a hose, which is visually kind of a weird thing, from the buildings over there to the dog washing area, this is the Public Works Department. There was never any thought of like actually running a water line over there?
You know, I think there has been discussion of doing, to the existing location,
Yeah.
so.
I mean, it just seems, I would drag a hose because I don't have any money and I don't have a
To
bunch of other
here,
stuff.
yeah. There has been discussion of doing that, but I don't think anything's ever been funded to do that.
So one more question, and it deals with, I've heard so much conversation that the Public Works has had with a small group of people from the bird sanctuary over 2 years practically. And through that period of time, there was no contact with any official bodies like commissions or boards that might have had a stake in this. But there was a ton of conversation with non-official groups and people about the development of this project, and I don't know, why was that?
Well, as I mentioned, we went before the City Council in February, and we also did go to the Parks and Recreation Board, but I just don't recall when that meeting actually
I've heard
occurred.
that didn't happen, but anyway, I'll take your word.
Well,
I've been told that
One of the
that happened.
questions-
I wasn't personally at that meeting, but I was told that
I guess
occurred.
to piggyback on that question, when you went to the Army Corps of Engineers and it's like almost 95% designed and you're going for review, I think that would have been a time possibly, right, that you would have come and gotten ideas from anyone that would have good comments or time for review of a project, right?
Hello, my name is Laura Biggs. I'm the city engineer. So I understand your concerns, and I do want to be sensitive to them, but I also want to just say that as we went before the city council, and all of the members of the city council had an opportunity to say, hey, we really need to have historic preservation's comments on these things, we did not get that. And I feel like part of what has happened here is we started with an ADA project, and we started with the idea that we were going to do a switchback down to the beach, and that was our option. What we were looking at were how do we engineering-wise create that kind of structure in an area that regularly gets subject to high wave action in a way that is durable, that is going to meet the requirements and the spirit of ADA, not just like the minimum, but actually create a safe space for people with disabilities to get down to the beach. And how do we do that in a space that is currently in operation, basically? So we really were looking at something we thought was a very straightforward ADA improvement. The city council, the consultant provided us, well, here's another option. And why is this other option feasible or desirable? Because of the natural grades of the area, we can move along and create a much shorter ramp in the wave action area that existed. This space on the bird sanctuary does not get subject to the same wave action, but it is lower. And so by following the natural grades, we keep most of the infrastructure we were building out of that space, that it potentially gets subject to much higher forces. It is much more difficult to create a durable structure. So the city council at that time said, hey, we really like this, but it's really important that we make sure that we're not impacting this sensitive area in a really negative way. And so we followed along, following the city council direction at that time. Now, in retrospect, should we have come to this board? Potentially, but we were just following the city council direction. Yes, sir.
First of all, I don't like the word potentially used in this context. But also, the fact is that there are a lot of different boards and committees that have a lot of different responsibilities with regard to projects. And it's up to those entities to do their job. It's really not, it shouldn't be predetermined as to whether or not they should be, because like city code and a lot of other stuff, they have a responsibility to be and a right to be involved at different stages. So, I've kind of felt like I've been here before with this kind of conversation, but I think it's not a suggestion that these bodies be involved, particularly preservation. It is a requirement. And for instance, with this project, we feel, well, I personally, as with my involvement with this group, feel we have a responsibility to avoid as much as possible any kind of visual impact on areas that are sensitive to the community and should be preserved to the community, as we've heard before. And so in all of our conversations, all the explanations, I didn't hear any reference specifically to the preservation aspect. That, for me, for instance, historic preservation of the beachfront is best if there's nothing on the beachfront, because that is the, that's the ultimate in terms of beauty and whatever. Times it's necessary to do things, and that's why we're here, to provide as much of a backstop, of a break on things like that. So that's my feeling.
Thank you for that feedback.
So I have a question. So you start off at the street, at the parking lot, right? And you come down to this revetment breakwater, and there's 4 feet. You're describing it as a boardwalk, sidewalk situation, but how do you how do you account for that 4 feet in elevation if it's not a ramp? Is it slowly ramping down, or, because it's over so many feet?
Yes, because it's so long. It's because it's so long.
So that
That's
it
exactly
doesn't have
correct.
it's
That's
not
correct.
considered a ramp
That's
then
correct.
because it's so gentle?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So then when you get to the breakwater.
Yes.
And there's, on the drawing, it's showing 75 feet of like sidewalk squares. Is that a ramp then? Or
No.
is it?
It will also be a sidewalk. It will be
So-
less than 5%.
Okay.
5% slope is the maximum allowable slope for a sidewalk. If it's more than 5%, it becomes a ramp and needs handrails and things like that. It will be less than that.
So basically you're making this as long as possible so it doesn't have to become a ramp.
That's correct.
So that, I mean, Mrs. Hampson wrote in her letter that she's going to spend all this energy getting to the beach and then won't have energy to play with her dog. And I'm concerned, I mean, if you said your goal is to do an ADA ramp, why didn't you do a ramp?
So some things that are hard for, some people are very easy for others and vice versa, right? Everyone's disability, if you have a disability or, I mean, I can't see, right, is unique to them. One thing that can be very difficult for disabled individuals is to have to ascend steep ramps. When it's a very gentle slope, like a sidewalk, like when you're just walking down the sidewalk, it's much, much easier than if you're trying to ascend like a 1 in 12, which is the maximum slope ramp. So by making it basically a sidewalk, it is longer, and perhaps that is more difficult for some individuals, but it will also be easier for others. And again, we're trying to kind of respond to, I think, the spirit of the ADA, and also respond to the just the natural slopes that we have on this property. Like, this property actually is, there's literally, if you go out there, you can see this walkway already basically there. It's just in sand.
As far as the ramp's concerned, we talk about sand moving all the time. We want it to be at grade is the idea, I assume. But does this design take into the account that the sand is going to move, and at some point there might be a drop off at the edge of the sidewalk, which could be dangerous perhaps, or what does that look like when the sand disappears for periods of time?
So are you referring to the sand on the
I'm talking about
north
the
side or the south side?
Either side.
Either side. Okay, because they're going to be really different conditions.
Okay.
And I mean, I can only predict so much here. I always say the crystal ball is really cloudy. Like, I have no idea what's going to happen, right? But there is so much sand on the Clark Street beach side that most likely that walkway and even the boardwalk, which I estimate would be maybe a foot off the ground, will probably get buried. So we're going to have to work to keep it from disappearing. It would disappear if we just leave it alone. Quickly, probably. So that's like, we have to clear it out. Now, on the other side, that's a totally different story, right? Now it's like, all kinds of stuff is going on here. So that's part of what that revetment is intended to do. Now, it's kind of squeezed in between the two revetments. So it's like rock and rock. And yeah, there's a chance that over time, some of the sand may move away. I think it's going to have, it's not just like a 4-foot wide sidewalk. I think it has kind of heavier ends to kind of seat it down, if I'm remembering correctly. But yeah, we may occasionally need to, touch up some of that sidewalk. The end of it, we estimate a lot of it's going to be buried. So at some point, you're going to kind of step off into the sand, or we're going to run out, and we have to do this every year. We do this at all of our beaches. We take these, what they're called Moby mats, which are these ADA kind of rollout mats, and we'll just extend it off of wherever this sidewalk gets buried. To that end,
why have a sidewalk at all and not just a Moby mat that could be moved? It's much less expensive. It can't be damaged because it could just be moved. I mean, I get it. This is a very beautiful project, and you guys have threaded the needle as best you possibly can, and I really appreciate that. I like to have that we have thoughtful people working with our city, but the concern is that maybe we're overdoing this.
Yeah. I think the engineers wanted to have something kind of permanent and fixed at that edge, that, especially because, again, the elevations are moving quite a bit, that they felt that we needed something concrete to tie into and to protect, and to give us the flexibility.
To protect what?
To protect the entrance.
So I have a question. So if your whole goal is to have a dog beach and have sand, because you have to have sand for a beach, did you explore putting in a breakwater into the water so that that would then prevent, higher waves, which would then lead to erosion of the sand?
We have.
Which then would potentially have, more sand, and then you could do a Moby mat kind of thing. So where instead of spending all this money on this ramp that may not,
So
that may lead to water instead of
if
sand.
you're talking
so-
about putting something out here in the water, yeah, we are looking at that. Oh, no. Well, as a separate project. That is something that's being studied. Yeah, but it's also not funded.
That's part of the bigger Smith
That's correct.
project. Yeah.
That's correct.
Stephanie, I had a quick question. How much of the project costs are, because it's come up a few times, are fixed in terms of just, I imagine the majority of the cost is the revetment and that infrastructure and less the boardwalk? Is that accurate?
That's a great question. I mean, unfortunately, I don't know the answer. It's a lump sum bid that we received, and we requested that the contractor provide a pricing breakdown for us, but they have not provided that. I think they felt like it compromised maybe their position in the bidding. So I cannot tell you that at this time. I don't know.
I think as I'm an architect, so when you're a hammer, things tend to be nails. And so when I looked at that and tried to understand and kind of walk down there, I thought it was a very elegant solution because of the fact that there was no ramp, that it would be a gentle walkway. So I applaud that, but I think the seat that you guys are in is not designing something. It's kind of making the problem for the people that will design it. And I think what we're hearing is that was the problem. And maybe not. I mean, maybe it would have ended up this, but it seems like I guess one question is there was community engagement, but it was the people over here and not these people. And it's just a process question. How does that happen? I mean, did you not know about Mayor Mike? I didn't know Mayor Mike before today, so maybe you just didn't know about him. But it seems like for 99% of the headaches that you guys have to deal with, if there were, I don't know what the process would be, but if there's a way to make that engagement happen so Alder Newsma doesn't get annoyed about people raising their hand.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, we did actually meet with Mike and a number of other individuals in May, I think, of 2023. So we did have a meeting. I agree. It was a little bit less formal than our normal process that we go through. And I'm not sure I have it. I mean, on most park projects, we'll have an initial community meeting. We come back with multiple designs and review them and then refine from there until we come up with a final solution. And we didn't elect to do that on this project, but I'm not sure if I can really speak to why that was done differently.
It'd be interesting to hear what the answer to that is.
I just wanted to echo what you said. Oh, go ahead.
I think she's going to answer my question. Sorry.
No, I think it's a very good question, and I don't actually have a really good answer for that either. I think that going to the city council with what we thought was a really simple project and then it ballooned, it just sort of got away from us.
It seems like any project that involves hundreds of thousands of dollars, you just stop and put your pencil down and say, don't we need to talk to some people?
So there are clear stakeholders in this project. There are the users of the dog beach, headed up by Michael, who gave us a presentation. There are people who are really invested in the bird sanctuary. There are people with disabilities that need to use this.
Right.
So we did not do a specific call to action, hey, come look at this project and have a big public open house. However, it was discussed at the commission, the subcommittee for disabilities at the Commission for Disabilities and Aging. They've discussed the project multiple times. We did meet with Mike Myers and, 20 to 30 people from the dog beach at the dog beach, talked through this very design, got their feedback on a number of things, and actually made changes related to their feedback. We met specifically with the people that maintain the bird sanctuary and the volunteers who are continuing the work on those species, got their feedback, hired a separate consultant as a result of that, and then worked with them to make sure that it met their needs. So I do understand what the concern is about how we did not have a big public open house, but we met with all the stakeholder groups individually in order to make sure that the people that had an invested interest in what was happening here would have the ability to have their say. In addition, it went to City Council a number of times where people that just generally are members of the public always have the ability to make a public comment. And in that, not just as a contract for approval, but also giving presentations as a special order of business to highlight what we were thinking, what their concerns are, and specifically solicit feedback that we then incorporate into the project. Some of the elements that you're looking at, like the stair down to the entrance versus just having a walkway, those were direct results of City Council feedback that we heard. So I guess that's my best answer.
No,
to
that's
that
very
question.
helpful, because if you hadn't said that, I would have had the impression that these folks had never been consulted, and they have. So now I'm trying to figure out there seems to be a disconnect, and I don't know if there's anything that we can do here to resolve that. But thank you.
And I just have a follow-up question too. Before the Public Works brings the projects to City Council for approval of the bid, is there any other opportunity for public comment within City Council during the design portion of the project, like the formal public comment period? During the design period, not just at ready to bid, here it goes, it's all wrapped up.
Not really. I mean, when we go through a concept, develop a concept, we typically hold some kind of public engagement process where people, provide feedback. But after that, between the time we kind of finalize the concept and you see us literally building in the field, there's really, that's like we terminate the engagements.
And do you bring that concept to the City Council where there's public comments available?
Often, no, we don't.
Okay.
In fact, I would say 95% of the park projects that, I've been here for, I'm not even going to talk about how many years I've been here, but have not come to council. They go through the public involvement process with the local community, typically. We arrive at, sometimes it takes a number of iterations. We arrive at a concept that we're all, generally comfortable with. And the alderman, council member, is usually involved in that process. And then that's it. And it does not go to council for any kind of, blessing or review.
Okay.
At what point did you sign an agreement? Was there a bid process, first of all, for the design?
So I was trying to explain this at the beginning. So Smith Group was hired, I don't even know what year, maybe 2020 when we had the high lake levels, and they were helping us get through that because we were losing beaches. We were starting to lose some of our parks. And then they were hired to do these preliminary lakefront shoreline repairs.
But there was no bid process for the design of this project to hire the.
They were. What I'm explaining is that they were
already on the job, so kind
right,
of,
and we brought forth a change order to add this work to their services.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry. We did go through a request for proposal process to hire them for the shoreline stabilization project.
Mm-hmm.
When the dog beach was opened, staff made the council aware of concerns about the need to provide ADA, and the city council directed to figure out how to move that process along. And because this ADA is building in the wave area and the beach area, you really need to have a coastal engineer involved in the design to make it structurally sound. And given that we wanted to move it along, we actually went and just did a change order, since we already had a coastal engineer that was looking at the shoreline and had already done a survey of all of the areas. We felt like that was appropriate.
Right. Another thing is, so at the point where it was when the bid when the bid documents were created, there was a choice to not have an itemized bid process. Is that kind of unusual, not to do lump sum bid?
It is not unusual in a park project. It is not unusual in a facilities project. It is not unusual in a project that we do at the water plant. The only time that we generally have itemized bids are for street and transportation projects. So if we were to go look at the industry, it's fairly uncommon in municipal work. Like if you go look what other park districts are doing, et cetera, for parks projects, the industry doesn't really know how to respond to fully itemized unit price bid work.
I did a lot of parks, built a lot of parks for city based on bids. And the idea of itemized bids was to be able to value engineer, to be able to, like, if the bid's too high, what can you take out to make it better? So I personally, I thought itemized bids were a better idea.
So we do, when we are concerned about project costs, we do bid alternates. Some of our bid projects have as many as 10 to 12 bid alternates. Some of them have fewer, depending on what we consider is the optional part of the work. This project itself had several bid alternates associated with it, and we're going with the less expensive way of building it because the project cost was more than we anticipated for the most part. So we do have that as a way to sort of do a value engineering for what we consider more optional parts of the project.
And did you pay Smith Group a separate price for the design of this project? Did they get
Yes.
So you gave them a change order on the larger project, and the change order defined a specific scope for them to attach a price to. What was the price for the design of this part, of this piece? Please don't.
I should know that off the top of my head. I can give you that answer in like 30 seconds, but it was a little over $100,000.
So the Smith Group got a change order from their original bid thing for $100,000 to design this.
Yes.
This piece. Okay.
So is that the amount that was included in the capital improvement plan part of the 24 budget, or is that separate?
That is a separate fee because of the way that that work was awarded. It was awarded based on a direction from City Council, primarily in the same year, I believe. So it didn't have a chance to get into the budget. So then budget was set aside for construction, but the work for the design had already been awarded outside the normal budget process.
Is that your question? Were you asking what construction budget the architects were given to design to? Is that, Charles, is that what you were asking?
Yeah, the design fee.
Oh, okay.
The engineering and design fee for this piece. Now,
Oh, never mind
who
then.
signed that change order? Who signs the change order for that?
So it was, anything over $25,000 goes to City Council for approval.
This went to City Council for approval for the additional $100,000 for the design of this. Okay. That's my last question.
And I'll ask the question then. What was the construction fee that they were given to design to? The rough estimate, or
They provided the estimate to us. And I think if you look back, if you go back, that was their estimate, $450,000.
So I think the point is, the city didn't say, we have a budget of 500,000, go. They said, this is what we need,
Got
design
it.
it and tell us what it's going to cost. And they said, this is, yeah. I just have one last question, and I guess it's kind of an obvious question. So there was a decision when you were making the problem that this should be, I think this is what it kind of comes down to, that this should be a permanent improvement to the city, right? Because there's on the ones that, yeah, okay. So I think, that's, so if you accept that this needs to be and is that because you studied a temporary improvement, which is what I'm going to call this, what's kind of been presented, although the elevations seem to be a bit off, that was just determined that wasn't feasible, that it was like going to be too much operational to kind of like do that every year, to pick it up and put it back, or just the thought behind the type of solution that was assigned?
Yes, but because of the way Lake Michigan has been behaving, so over time, historically, you would see lake levels go up to lake levels go down. The difference in that is maybe 6 feet in height of water. And that would take, 30 years to happen, except now it's not taking 30 years to happen. High to low to average to whatever is happening very fast. And meanwhile, we're having a lot of high wave events. So right now the water is just above average level, and yet we still continue to have high wave events that some of which continue to overtop our revetments with the waves. And these are things that we didn't necessarily experience in the past. It's just behaving very differently. So the idea that you would have a temporary structure and you would just put it in the summer and you would take it out in the winter, because traditionally the storms and the wave action have been much more intense in the winter. It just wasn't really feasible. It doesn't match our reality. For one thing, the Dog Beach stayed open most of the winter. So sometimes not very usable. The wave levels are very high. A lot of the strand disappears. Maybe not so much this year because the water's a little lower than it was the last couple of years, but it's definitely still happening. So the idea of like, when are we putting in the temporary structure? When are we taking it out? Is that happening like every time there's a wave event? If you have infrastructure that's not designed for the waves, in the path of these waves, the infrastructure is damaged or gone. So it became a question of like, is it really feasible for the staff we have, which are already stretched pretty thin because there's been a lot of cuts in staff over the last 10 to 15 years, is it feasible for them to have a crew on standby to constantly be taking this infrastructure in and out? And it's not light. It's not easy.
I'm sorry, I do have two more questions real quick. One, first of all, what was the response to the Parks and Rec Board? How did they, what were their comments about this, or did they have any, or what was that?
Stephanie and I were not at that meeting or at those meetings. They were talked through by the Assistant Director of Parks and Recs, and he said there were not really any comments given.
Didn't have any comments. And the other thing is, what was the bid price to do the work? So that was the.
It was $693,000.
So the estimate was was $450.
The estimate was $450. There were things that were added,
like the water thing. I think you mentioned,
such as the boardwalk, in order to deal with the sensitive plants.
Yeah.
And there was a light. But in addition, for a couple of years, we saw 20% construction inflation per year. This year, they had thought it would come back down. It's at like 15%, not 20%. So we've just been in a period of really high construction inflation. It's been really difficult to have estimates that are accurate.
And were all bid alternates denied?
So we actually want to accept some bid alternates because they reduce the cost.
Oh.
Yeah. One bid alternate, the original bid included the use of, oh goodness, here we go. This is going to happen to me all the time now. Thermally modified ash as the boardwalk material. Yeah. Because, it's kind of a cool product to use, right? And kind of responsible, or hopefully. And it turned out it's really, really, really expensive. And way more than the consultant thought. And so the alternate is to use ePay, and it's a lot cheaper, surprisingly.
Cheaper than the pine in the base scope?
Well, we don't have pine as a base scope.
Oh, what's the base type?
The base scope was the thermally modified ash.
Oh.
Yeah.
In the, not the documents were shown, but. Okay.
They
Not
should
the ones
be,
that we were.
they should be shown on those documents. They should be indicated. A lot of these things happen also in, our specifications, which, you guys don't really look at.
Yeah.
But,
Okay.
but anyway, we're not proposing pine.
Okay. So it would be, so you're going to accept the IPE
EP.
product.
EP.
Thank you.
Yes.
Product
Yeah,
instead.
that's the intention
And that's actually
there.
a reduction in
It's
cost.
actually a reduction, yes.
And question, for especially talking about materials for the boardwalk, why not use all boardwalk and get rid of the concrete, especially with sustainability goals and whatnot?
I suspect that the boardwalk is contributing a fair amount to the cost, the high cost of the project.
Okay.
So we are trying to implement that where we need to be as protective as possible to the existing plant material. And where we don't need to, we're trying to steer away from that. So that is a cost consideration.
That's a cost issue.
I have a question. The permanent, some of these permanent designs, you said there is maintenance required, though. I mean, I think you mentioned you're going to have teams of people moving the sand based on what happens. Is that right?
Yeah, they'll definitely need to be sand maintenance. We have to deal with that all the time now anyway. If you go there in the winter, particularly, you'll see fencing up, and then it's moved, and then it's back.
Right, so I guess I'm wondering, the temporary solution also requires a little bit of legwork. And it sounds like there's already, that's sort of built into your permanent solution. There are people that do these things already who could maybe just move the ramp or whatever needs to be done. And also at such a lower cost. I mean, you could replace that ramp like 4 times over, you could keep, not that you want to, but I'm saying you could even hire someone to take that out for the delta there. You could have like a one-person staff that goes out there. I mean, there's just such a differential on the cost.
So I'm not certain that the design that was discussed here could actually be implemented in the manner that it was proposed or for the cost it was proposed. Something like that would have to be examined much more closely and may end up being also quite costly. I can't say for certain.
Sure.
But it also, I think, it's one thing to move sand from the surface of a path. It's a totally different thing to try to pick up, a large section of a ramping system.
Yeah, I guess some of my issue here is that I think you just literally took the words out of my mouth when you said if your only tool is a hammer, every problem you see is a nail. And I think when you bid this out to an architectural design firm, their bias is to create very elaborate solutions, maybe over-engineered, that aren't necessarily required to meet the needs of like the ADA needs that people need. I was, it was persuasive to have all these people talk about not wanting this design, but nobody came out here to talk about why they want this design. Like I didn't hear one person from the community, not to say that there aren't people, but no one felt strongly enough to come out here to like advocate other than the city folks who are working with the consultants and the engineers who are, charging 800 or whatever, 700,000, K for this job. So I think I just have a little bit of problem with the way that there were only binary choices offered. And while you did, talk to a lot of groups, which is great, you were talking to them in the framework of 2 options, and they were giving you feedback on those 2 rather than like a third. Like, is there something else we should be considering outside of these?
And I think that's why it's important to get these kinds of groups involved at this early stage, because then you can avoid so much of this. Like, yes, it's so frustrating. If you engage with a million different stakeholders, nothing happens. Like, if I want anything on my tombstone, it's like, don't make the perfect enemy of the good. And what would make me nervous about voting against this right now is what I don't want to see is nothing happen. Like, this proposal that the gentleman talked about, I agree, like that has to be vetted, and what that actually might look like will probably be different. It'll probably be more expensive because everything's more expensive. My husband always says just double it. But like we could have gotten here in a different way, and like, I just, I feel like it's a shame because you put so much effort. I mean, that timeline was extensive. Like, you engaged with so many different stakeholders, and that's what I want to see, but I feel like we didn't talk to the right stakeholders.
So sorry, I'm going back to design and in terms of the historic district. So you said there were 2 lights that you're installing along this boardwalk, right? One at the entrance to the dog beach and one kind of near this the viewing platform, right?
There would only be one.
Oh, there's one. Okay.
It would be installed basically right in this area. The Parks Department wanted to install 2 additional lights, but that was an alternate also, and it's obviously adding cost, so we are not recommending.
The reason I'm asking is because this is near a bird sanctuary. The beachfront is a migratory path for millions, literally millions of birds, butterflies and birds and all types of, animals that migrate. And are there any other beaches that have lights east of the rocks revetment wall? Because I think we're introducing a light source that could potentially be affecting, because
we have these identical lights up and down the entire lakefront. Some of them, I think, in the Dempster area, they're probably just to the east of where the revetments sometimes are. They occur approximately every 100 feet along the entire lake.
And would that be a compatible light design to what is along the path,
yes,
the bike pathway,
they're identical.
or a
they're
tonnage
identical.
light?
They're identical.
Okay.
So they're a fully shielded, only shines straight down. And again, the only purpose for that light was to try to provide some illumination for safety of individuals using the dog beach in the evenings.
Are there certain hours of the dog beach? Or does it just follow the beach
There are,
hours?
but I actually don't know the hours.
Okay, yeah, could you, thank you.
In theory, it's sort of like sunrise, which changes.
Yeah.
I think it closes at 10, but, they don't chain it. People can go out there.
Yeah.
But,
Okay.
There's a light at the entrance, which is great, so you can put your code in.
Yeah, I
So-
can see that.
So there are hours, but
Yeah.
not really.
Okay.
So just so we have an understanding of what it would look like if we said we did not recommend this. Let's say we thought it was a good idea to have something that was a little bit smaller. That has to go through a process, I assume. What would it look like to go back and say, hey, what about a smaller scope? Like, what would that even look like?
So next steps, this is going back to the city council meeting on July 8th. So whatever the comments are from this group will go into what's presented to city council. If they were to direct us to do a different scope, then we would need to pay our consultant probably to develop different concepts and vet that information or to provide feedback. There's a certain amount of things related to permitting that as long as you're putting in concrete foundations, and even if a portion of this is temporary, we would still be required to design it and get the appropriate permits.
So minimally, let's say it costs $100,000 to design this. If we're going to go find a different person, we're talking about another $100,000 plus whatever the cost of, the new thing would be. Like, it would still cost several $100,000 likely to start this process over again, even with the smaller scope.
I mean, it's hard to know what the new scope would be and what would be involved. They only have to engineer the part they have to engineer. But it would definitely be, we would have spent this $100,000 and that's just lost. It's done. And we would need to start again with a new scope of work. Whether if we hire somebody separate from Smith Group, but we still want them to be a coastal engineer so that they can engineer it, even if it's just the foundations, they need to engineer it to be on the coast, and we would still need the money for the permitting. we would have to go out for an RFP and hire somebody and start again. So it would be hard for me to believe that that would be less than $50,000 or $75,000.
Thanks.
Can I ask a construction question? To put a concrete sidewalk on sand, it just floats on the sand, or do you put a foundation underneath it?
There's a foundation. I think the foundation for this, I think you can go at least 4 feet down into the sand. I would have to look at the drawings, but they're pouring a concrete pier footing with a
Right.
footing under the sand and grounding it in sand. Because you
And-
can't do it
right.
just floating on
A-
top.
And you believe that's much less expensive than a boardwalk?
Well, the boardwalk still has piers
No,
going
I
down.
understand, but yeah,
Nothing is grounded in the top 1 foot of the sand.
right.
Because sand
It's
is
floating,
just
right.
notoriously fickle.
And
It moves.
And the secondary piece of this walkway with the steps on it, that was because village council requested that?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you identify the path of travel of the closest 88 parking spots?
So they're off screen.
Yeah, I
Um,
figure.
This is that turnaround. We were kind of looking at an image.
Yeah.
This is the building. There's a parking lot. It's probably right around here.
Yeah,
Those
okay.
are all ADA spaces. Only ADA spaces.
So
Okay.
during.
But for the
so-
beach
so
too,
the-
right?
The
Sorry.
parking that's parallel to the dog beach is all for what? Boating?
Correct. It's for boating.
And so could the boating parking go to that parking lot and then the ADA move?
No.
No?
You cannot.
Why?
Are there
Because
no
they're large boats and they have to like maneuver and park and they have to unload and load and they pay this enormous fee to do that. That is really not for any other use.
So there's actually this parking to the left is gated, is it? So you have to have a code to get into the gate that has to, I'm sorry, I should be speaking in the microphone. The parking that we're referring to, could we just relocate it's gated, and in order to relocate the ADA spots over to that area, they would have to be able to access a gate code. It is potentially that there's a feasible way to figure that out, but you're talking about a much bigger process about how to do that, to allow, essentially you would be allowing people to have the gate code that haven't paid the fee, and then we would have to restripe the parking lot to allow ADA. So there'd be things that would have to happen. Is it impossible? Of course not. Nothing is impossible. But it's not just that simple.
Isn't there parking at the cul-de-sac, at the Dog Beach entrance, at the right up? It's
No.
It's up.
So there's parallel parking and then there's the diagonal parking on the west side of that area, right? Am I? No, that's further down. There's 3 handicap spaces and then everything else is boat ramp.
Can you go up?
When I was there earlier,
So
I
where
put
the
on my
what's in
hazards
the
in the
area?
turnaround and illegally went to the dog park to take a look at it.
I think,
So can you show us where the gate is for the boat parking?
It's kind of hidden by these, it's right here.
Are those fees for the boat, are they annual
Yes.
permits? Okay, so you could potentially, change that like the following year. Once the lapse on the permit, you could consider restriping and putting in parking spots and moving some of the, or eliminating some of those boat parking.
I think that's something that would have to be discussed with the Parks and Rec.
Of course, I'm just saying it's possible, right?
But I guess in theory, yeah.
Because it's not a lifetime pass. It's like an annual one that you renew.
I believe it's an annual pass.
How long do you all expect construction to take?
Well, we have to finish getting through the permitting process too.
Yeah.
Assuming we are able to award the project. And obviously, the later on we get in the year, the harder it gets to build. But I think we were hoping to get the project completed by the end of the year.
Oh.
But at this point, we're starting to, it's getting a little bit long here, so could be challenging.
So what was originally conceived in the project documents was that you could start construction in mid-August and that you would be done by December 31st.
But we have to order materials. That takes quite a while. So now that it's July, right, we're starting to run into trouble here with that.
And then just two kind of particular questions about the design as is. The fencing that you're using, I think along the sidewalk part, not the boardwalk part, it has a top railing, and I think it's like at 42 inches. What is the eye level of a person in a wheelchair?
Go to the next, please.
Yeah, there you go.
The fencing along the, oh gosh, this fence here?
Yeah.
There's no top rail.
Well, what is the horizon example right there? I thought we were using that.
So this is along the boardwalk section. This is along the walkway. They're very different products.
Pardon me then. Okay, then.
Yeah.
Same question, just for the boardwalk.
I don't actually know the answer to that.
Okay, so that was just one of my kind of particular ones. And then the other one was using the steel handrails in a beach application. I'm just thinking of how hot those railings are going to get. Was there a consideration of a different material anywhere you're using the powder coated or the galvanized steel handrails?
We had not talked about that.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Any more questions from the commissioners? Because then if not, then the process goes that then we would close the record and that then we would be discussing amongst ourselves with the goal of coming up with the comments that we'll be delivering to City Council. Any more questions for the department? I believe, I don't think so. Yeah, the public comment period is over.
We would have liked to have our comments after theirs.
I understand.
To address their fiction.
Right. I understand that. It's just not how the agenda is formed ever for these meetings. I get it. And that's why we were trying to hear what you all said and trying to bring those things up. I know you all have a unique point of view.
So
but
tonight, we did hear from you loud and clear, and this is going back to AP&W, where there is going to be an opportunity for public comment, so you could potentially respond to the city's presentation then. Just saying.
Any more questions from the commissioners for Public Works?
Thank you.
Okay. Then we'll close the record and then we can talk amongst ourselves about how we will come up with our comments and want to hear what you all heard as priorities.
I just want to kick it off with, I know this is not a COA, but I was looking at our standards of review, and the one that popped out to me was reasonable effort to adapt a site requiring minimal alteration. And I just, like looking at my preservation lens, it just doesn't feel like that is happening. It's not the minimal alteration. I think there's some option 3s that would be less disruptive to the birds, to the sight lines, to the environment. And so I think that's where I come down on this.
Can I just jump in and just state that do we feel like one of our comments to the council should be we should consider a third option? What does everyone
We should
feel
consider
about
a third option, and something that we talked about is we need to ask council. I mean, they said we responded to council. Like, we have a process problem here, and part of it is because we're not talking to the right people, and we're one of the people that this should be part of that conversation, so we can avoid this.
But it never came before the commission.
No, I know.
This is new. This is fresh
that's
for
what I'm
us.
saying.
It went
that's what I'm saying.
administrative, which is
I'm saying
different.
we need to tell council, hey, come to us, so we can avoid this.
So one of my questions is the proposed ramp, the third option proposal that we received tonight from the working group could potentially be done if we're talking about speed and trying to get access to the beach. It could potentially, at the rules and procedures, it could be done, a ramp, I guess, is administrative work, and can be done by staff. You know, the review could be done that way, just to to speed the process, unless everyone wants to see, they come back to see a third option.
Yeah, I'm all about having this done more cheaply, and not cheaply, I don't want to use that word, but, more efficiently. So I don't necessarily want a third option as being only considered. If there's an administrative way to get something that meets our preservation goals, which is, the minimal, changes to the site, I think that would be good.
Well, I think a lot of work has been put into this, and I think they explained that there was an option that maybe a lot of us would have been more interested in seeing, which didn't cut through the dune. And we heard from these folks with the city that that was more work. For me, it seems like, I agree that going through the dune seems to kind of run counter to preserving the natural environment. It's a nice place to look at it, but you're kind of disturbing it. We can advise about whether something should be permanent or not, but the folks that have looked at this have said, I asked, and they said there's not a good light, concrete-less solution. And I feel like they've probably looked at this. So it seems like the question, with all due respect to the folks that looked at this, I'm not sure that there's throw some buoys out there and get down there without spending $800,000. I'm not convinced of that. I'm not convinced that we need to cut through the dune either. But I think we have to ask the hard question of, if we want access, if we really say, we all say we want access, and this is a permanent way to provide access, and nobody's put forth, maybe it hasn't been studied. So if there's a third option to be studied, it would be I don't know what kind of case studies staff does before you go out to Smith Group and the fancy firms downtown to just say, how are folks getting to water without concrete? Maybe. So I guess what I'm proposing is maybe a third. Don't spend another $100,000 on Smith Group. Nothing against Smith Group, but maybe just look at defining the problem a little bit differently in-house. And I know you guys are probably overworked, so I don't know if there's time for that. But I would be interested, because I feel like you guys are pretty smart. I'm convinced of that. So I would be interested in seeing maybe if is it worth framing the problem differently, so that these folks could be either convinced that, gosh, that was a good idea, but it just doesn't work, or wait, in the Netherlands they're doing this other thing. Maybe we could do that.
I think that Smith Group, they're famous. They're great. They if you form the right question, they will probably find you, the right solution. I think that this could have been pretty simple if you said, we want to start here and we want to end up here with a safe, manageable, ADA access. There's just a whole bunch of alternatives that could pop up just asking that question, and most of them probably wouldn't have 4 benches in them or a bunch of feet of. But I think that when you say we should have a third option, I think in order to arrive at another option, I think there's a you have to form the question a little differently, because I don't think that the idea of not disturbing that area was put out there. I don't think that the preservation perspective of protecting the visual aspect of the lakefront might not have just put out there as a priority. So if you give them those priorities and you give them $100,000, they better come up with something that everybody's going to be satisfied with. So if you don't tell them what you want, and you accept what they deliver without a whole lot of deliberation, this is a situation you end up in.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, the way it was bid, and I think this might be common, but there was no budget put around it. Like, we would like this done with a budget of, I don't know, 400,000, for example, rather than giving them a blank check and saying, create this, and they come back with, like, as a taxpayer, not just a commissioner, I'm kind of horrified at like 800,000 for construction and 100,000 on design, like $1 million ramp. Like, it really bothers me. Taxes are expensive, and like $1 million ramp just feels extra. And I just would really like to see projects like this bid with a budget in mind so that they can tailor the solution to the budget that we have, because I know there's budget constraints at the city level that you have to consider. And I'm just struggling with that.
So I think that we all agree that we want access to the dog beach. We all agree we want to have minimal impact to the historic district. That's what I'm gathering, I think. So why can't we just do some kind of pilot this summer, get it out there and see what is the usage? Are we going to have a lot of accessible, a lot of people with mobility challenges that want to access the beach? So that way we can get hard facts. We can get like how many people are coming, and with the usage, and then we can buy some more time to
I believe
do this
it's a federal requirement, though. You have to provide access to all publicly.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, like,
But what it looks like, I mean, we talked about how there's different kinds of disabilities that, like, one kind of solution doesn't work for one, could work for another. I think a pilot program with something that's simpler would actually be really great. Because then we could see, okay, are the needs of the most, which is really what we're talking about, being met? Because you can't meet the needs for absolutely every possible thing. And I think that something like that seems great.
Right. I'm just trying to. I'm trying to compromise here between, it's like, because we have this $1 million project that's being ramrodded through, but we also want to provide access. So how can we provide access while we've tightened our belt a little and, come up with a better solution that's less money?
I have two issues with this whole thing, is that, first of all, if I'm ADA and I'm parking 2 blocks away to get to this, whatever, it's through the loop and over, and I'm in a wheelchair or some kind of disability, and I'm walking through where everyone's dropping off their kids for the beach and everything else with a dog, it just seems like a dangerous situation to me. The second thing is, I think the design is beautiful, but if it's only to get to the dog beach, I'm insulted that you're spending $1 million. I don't have a dog. I actually live across the street. I think it's really pretty, but I can walk to the end and then I can't get in anywhere. So you're building all this for the dog beach, which I appreciate. But it's not fulfilling. You're spending a lot of money for ADA access to the dog beach. And again, I don't think it's an easy solution for ADA people to get to this, and then no one else can use it. So those are my 2 thoughts.
So how do we package and summarize all this, and if we want to make a recommendation to the...
That's actually useful for somebody. I mean, like, this has to be useful for city council to action on.
Kate, is this a situation where, we're not going to create a document right now. Everybody's hungry. Speaking for myself. Is this something that we can give you notes and we can circulate something and trust your wonderful English skills that it's going to be relatively coherent?
I think just in terms of the timing, I would say that it's probably more appropriate just to say something and have that transmitted directly to them.
So we just go down the line?
Considering the timing of when city council materials and packets have to be posted, we're talking about like tomorrow.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, the timing is very short. You don't have to summarize them. It can be transmitted just as you've spoken already. I would imagine the video link is what will be provided in the council packet to review. It also wouldn't hurt if there's some kind of summary in case they don't want to
Yeah.
watch an
I'm,
hour and a half
I'm
long
guessing
meeting.
I'm guessing nobody's going to watch a video of this.
No, they're not.
They're here.
Some of us will. Right. Okay. Well, so that's great.
Send them some.
I would love to know exactly what the council would do with this. I guess what I'm proposing is if we just go down the line, and if somebody's got some technology so that it can transcribe it, so that there's something like a summary that they can get a snapshot.
Like bullets, yeah.
No, that's exactly what I would like, ideally, for us to have a summary of our comments. 6 points, a dozen points, I don't know, 3 points.
So
2 points. All right, Tums, you are hungry.
So then, can I make a motion then?
I don't think
to do a
it's part of our
recommendation
discussion.
to?
I think it's just part of our discussion.
Okay.
I mean, we're not making it, there's no vote to be taken on this. This is all discussion.
Who's the secretary among us? I should know that. Is it Carl.
We already
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
yeah,
So we'll talk slowly, but not so slowly that people go to sleep, and maybe just a couple. Does that sound like a good idea to people? Just a couple of highlights, so that. And before I even do that, Kate, is this something that is? Can it be? If he types it up, it gets transmitted and it makes it in for the July 8th.
I think it's entirely possible. It's also entirely possible that our friends from Public Works can take that information and make that part of their presentation.
I'm comfortable synthesizing if we go down the line and then giving it to Cade forward to the committee.
Yeah,
Can I just say one more thing? Commissioner Rizzolo, you mentioned a good point. I didn't think about. So the people going to the Clark Street Beach are going to go through next to that building, are also going to enter with their dogs. Okay, so the reason I bring that up, I'm so glad you said that. I have a special needs son who's very allergic to dogs. We go to that beach every Saturday. He's very scared of dogs because he knows he's very allergic to dogs. I would be very concerned about having that entryway be the same as where the general population walks in, just like as an aside.
1 second, let me just.
Should we just start at one end and
Yeah, let's-
make the short comments? We'll just go through and that's, so you want to start either end? You're on a roll, you can go first.
Okay, I'm on just a couple of reasons why I would recommend exploring a third option, mainly due to the presence of the constituents here who have kind of spoken and told us what works and what doesn't work for dogs, for ADA, and for the environment, for the birds, and then also just from a taxpayer perspective, I find that price to be very high.
Yeah, I think when the problem was designed, it maybe didn't adequately incorporate the preservation of the natural environment enough. I know you guys went to great lengths with talking to the plant biologists and all that. And if there was a way without engaging consultants, but to in-house do some quick precedent studies of what's being done in other places to see if there's even some other way to think about this before it's awarded.
Okay, first of all, I think that this beautiful design that was done for this gentle ramp should just do that at some other beach. I think South Boulevard Beach folks would love to have an ADA access like that, or Dempster. So we already have a really nice design. Just do it someplace else. And I think that in terms of the dog beach, I think that the structure should be done within the dog beach in order not to have a severe impact on all these other areas. You got the boat people, they're not going to give up a doggone thing. I don't want to see that area disturbed next to the bird sanctuary. Do the ramp within the dog beach area.
Thank you. I would like to highlight for the council that the process needs to adhere to the ordinance, that input from the Preservation Council is mandated. It's not an option. It's not a potential task to check off the list. We are tasked with providing input And again, best practices is early in design when you can take best advantage of these different inputs. Most of us have, experience with the built environment as a homeowner, as a professional, as just a resident of Evanston. And so I really want to, I would like to see that highlighted, just the process by which we do things. And if there are any questions about what kind of projects require this commission's review, then ask the question, but bring it up to not just the city council, but bring it up to our staff person who is always available and knows the ordinance backwards and forwards and can help make those decisions. And also guide whether it's an administrative or a full commission review. And so first of all, just process. I'd really like to see that highlighted. I definitely appreciate hearing more information from the Public Works people about how their design came to be what it is. I agree with commissioners that I'm wondering if the right question was asked of the designers. They created an amazingly beautiful design. I like it. But right, especially given all the input from the public, that I think cost is a huge factor. I think just making efficient use of the money that is there in across Evanston as much as possible, and that's a decision. I think the budget is a decision of the council to say whoa, 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 or oh yeah, we have that ready to go. But just yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought on that one. But I appreciate the more information that you all provided. The design makes a lot more sense to me now. I can kind of see why the price got up so high, but let's make sure that we're asking the right questions to begin with the right priorities of the bird sanctuary, the plants, the accessibility, the crowding on the sidewalks, crowding, the parking spaces really far away, just making sure that we gather all those stakeholder priorities early. Go ahead, please.
This has mostly been covered, but just briefly, I think the two goals in mind should be the most minimal impact to the area and cost.
Well, first of all, I've got to thank you guys because it was a great presentation. It's a beautiful solution. It's really pretty. I just don't know if it meets what everyone else said, the criteria of the people using it. I think the plants are saved. That's great. And I don't have a problem with the design at all. I just don't think that people who will be using it it's to their best benefit. So, and I think that needs to be taken into consideration if you redesign it.
And Carl?
Yeah,
Please.
I'm sorry, I was just wanted to make sure I got everyone now. So I'm concerned that the impact of the historic district and the historic nature of the lakefront was not taken into consideration. And yes, there was 2 years of meetings with stakeholders, but I don't feel like it was as inclusive as it should be, especially when the topic is about accessibility and trying to make sure that we're including everyone. And I think also we should keep the scope and the cost of the project down with the potential third option.
Okay, thank you. And do you feel you were able to capture those points?
Yeah.
Do you need anyone to repeat anything?
No, I think I'm recording it, and I also wrote
smart.
it, so I'll have a statement by tomorrow.
Okay, perfect. All right. The only item left on our agenda then is to adjourn. And I will remind the commissioners that our next meeting is in 2 short weeks. Our regularly scheduled meeting is on July 16th. And with that, I adjourn this meeting. Thank you all very, very much for coming tonight.